Namaskar. Now we are going to study about the region in the context of globalization. Globalization is a generic term and a well-known concept in the world. It can be defined in a number of different ways depending on the context. The definition given by Knight and DeWitt in 1997 for globalization is the flow of technology, economy, knowledge, people, values, ideas across the borders. Globalization affects every country in a different way due to a nation's individual history, traditions, culture and priorities. Globalization is a process that cuts across the boundaries of nations, cultures and societies. It is a large integration of the world. It facilitates interdependence towards a global culture. Globalization is expected to be a process through which an increasingly free flow of ideas, people, goods, services and capital would lead to the integration of economies and societies. It is characterized by an accelerated flow of trade, capital and information as well as mobility of individuals across geographical borders. Hence, in this episode, the following aspects are going to be seen: the migration of women in the context of globalization, challenges of globalization on Indian higher education, dairy marketing strategies in the context of globalization, productivity growth in Indian agriculture, globalization and Northeast India. The first aspect is the migration of women in the context of globalization. Globalization has become one of the most used terms of the 1990s. It signifies the transition towards a global community with common norms and an institutional framework that facilitates international cooperation. The economic implications of the concept revolve around the assumptions that there are forces operating at the global level that are behind the direct control of any particular country, but which increasingly tie states into borders groupings. The authority and integrity of the nation state are thus being eroded. Global communications are diffusing common values not only in terms of consumer pattern but also in attitudes towards the number of children and ultimately towards family size, marriage and family formation. In this aspect, the subtopic is regional division. The regional divisions reflect changing intensity of involvement in the global system. The first region represents core areas as sources of investments for other parts of the Asian region. These are highly urbanized areas in which the status of women in terms of education and participation in the labor forces trends to be high. Although manufacturing remains important, throughout much of this region, it is the emergence of a treasury services economy that has been the principal recent structural change in the economies. The second region represents expansion of the core areas and encompasses those areas to which most of the foreign and domestic investments have been directed. Such investment has been extremely unevenly distributed across space and is concentrated in special economic zones, growth triangles or other centers of economic dynamisms. These are areas of intense immigration and rapid urban growth. The third region, the labor frontier, represents the sources for much of the migration to the centers of dynamisms where the impact on status is one of the out-migration rather than immigration. The fourth region, the resource niche, represents those areas that are as yet quite tenuously linked to the global system, where there is as yet relatively little out-migration or immigration. The final region represents those small islands economies that exhibit a great variety in their migration patterns and their degree of integration with the global community. General conclusions about the impact of globalization on female migration for a region as large as that covered by ESCAP would be largely meaningless. A policy recommendation is need to be geared to specific situations in specific contexts, which reinforce the advantages of a regional approach to the assessment of the impact of globalization on the migration of women. The impact of global forces on female migration will be examined for each region before an attempt is made at policy recommendations. The core economies are the most developed and most highly urbanized areas in India. Fertility has come down to low levels, and throughout this region, immigration rather than emigration is the dominant trend. In all of these economies, the participation of women in education is high, and the incorporation of women into the labor force as recorded by official figures is also high. The shift towards a service economy as urban centers in these economies have emerged as regional global cities as favored the incorporation of women into the labor force at all skill levels. There are nevertheless significant differences in the patterns of female migration associated with the globalization in sub-regions. The second aspect is challenges of globalization on Indian higher education. Higher education has attained a key position in the knowledge society under globalized economy. However, the challenges faced are immense and far-reaching. Its impact on the institutions, systems and societies is not clear but also not comprehensible at this moment unless it is viewed in the context of various other factors that are simultaneously operating on the higher education system. Some agree that the rapid cross-national flows of people, goods, capital and information may dissolve the nation state, push institutions into common mold, whereas others disagree. Globalization promises dramatic and rewarding change to the higher education systems of societies, which are relatively stable in their political, social and institutional makeup, while for the others it may threaten the very stability needed to build well-performing higher education system. It is also true that so far globalization has given the advanced economies a huge advantage as they had made enough preparation prior to its launching, while others are caught into the trap without any preparation. Globalization also promises dramatic and rewarding change to the higher education system of the developed countries, whereas for developing and the underdeveloped countries where the system is facing the scarcity of resources, it retains the stability needed to build the well-performing system. Under this aspect, we are going to study the present scenario of higher education in India. As on today, we have more than 300 universities, institutions of higher learning and deemed universities, out of which 95 deemed to be universities, 13 institutions of national importance, 19 central universities, 203 state universities, 5 institutions established under State Legislation Act, about 16,885 colleges including 203 autonomous colleges. Education system has increased 14-fold in terms of the number of universities and 33-fold in terms of number of colleges in comparison to the number at the time of independence. The center, state institutions and regulatory bodies have taken initiation in order to face the challenges of globalization. The National Policy on Education 1986 and the revised policy POA in 1992 have made no references to the operating of foreign universities in India or promotion of Indian higher education abroad. UGC provides financial assistance to universities and colleges for establishment of computer centers and upgradation of computer facilities in the center in order to use computer in research and training. Computer assistance to College Development Council of 64 universities have been provided. In addition, 4,219 colleges have been given financial assistance on setting computer facilities. Besides these, several other policy interventions have been made in various 5-year plans of the country and by the UGC to improve access, retention and better performance of the disadvantaged groups. The second subtopic is World Trade Organization on higher education in India. The impact and globalization and WTO and GATS on the higher education would be multidimensional. It would be on the higher education policy programs and its implementation, the very system of higher education, the structure functions and structure functions relations, the accreditation and assessment of higher education, the role of regulatory bodies, the individual institutional policy and programs, and finally on the act and status of universities and state education acts. If higher education becomes a part of the WTO, it necessitates a restructuring of the higher education system, not only to cater the new set of international regulations, but also to cater to the international marketplace, which means universities are to guarantee market access to educational products and institutions of all kinds. An analysis on operation of foreign universities in India reveals that the programs offered ranges from diploma UGC to PG courses such as TV production, technology, business, hotel management, tourism management, science, media, hospitality and communication, graphics design, engineering, architecture, MBBS, dental surgery, BBA, MBA, agriculture, science, humanities, honors courses, social studies, human languages, bachelor and masters in information technology. Duration varies from 4 months to 4 years depending on the types of courses. There are also institutions and centers assisting in the operation of foreign universities in India and Indian universities abroad. WTO is expected to facilitate educational products of all kinds to be freely exported from one country to another. However, it would become very difficult to regulate the trade in academic institutions, programs, degrees or products across international borders. At present, the jurisdiction over higher education is entirely in the hands of national authorities. As on today, out of 5,14,000 foreign students currently studying in the US, more than 54% are from Asia. 7 of the top 10 sending countries of international foreign students to the US are Asians, while not a single Asian country is represented among the top 10 destinations for American students studying abroad. India alone accounts for more than 79,736 students, representing 13.9% of the total number of international students in the United States, compared to only 703 Americans who studied in India during the 2000 to 2003 academic year. Worldwide student mobility data compiled annually by UNESCO confirms similar imbalance in student exchange between India and other industrialized countries. The third aspect is dairy marketing strategies in the context of globalization. Globalization is one of the greatest strategic challenges for all industries as well as dairy industry. Globalization has increased significantly over the last decade, and despite financial crisis and recession in many parts of the world, globalization will likely continue, albeit with less force than before. Globalization is far from a unique concept. Globalization can also have multiple dimensions and applications. It is not just about selling of foreign customers, it is also about recognizing the international competition and to adjust production, resources, investment and organization to these challenges. Under this aspect, the first subtopic is outline of dairy industry in India. India is the world's largest milk producer, accounting for more than 13% of the world's total milk production. As it is the world's largest consumer of dairy products but consuming almost 100% of its own milk production. Dairy products are a major source of cheap and nutritious food to millions of people in India. and the only acceptable source of animal protein for large vegetarian segment of Indian population, particularly among the landless small and marginal farmers and women. In India, about 3/4 of the population live in rural areas and about 38% of them are poor. Global opportunities available to the Indian dairy industry arise primarily out of the availability of a large quantity of competitive priced milk. As the Indian dairy sector produces milk without any subsidies, the country stands to gain from the fair implementation of WTO agreements. Therefore, to having shared in global market, overviewed the dairy situation, finding problems, areas and challenges is necessary. Some of the major problems are lack of quality in dairy product to face challenges with global market. Milk yield per animal is very low. The demand for quality dairy product is rising in all over the world, especially in developed countries. Therefore, to improve quality of milk and dairy product, Indian dairy industry need to identify and address quality relation problems at every stage, from the producer at the village cooperative to the dairy plant and the process finally delivered to the consumer. Also facilitate improvement of hygiene, sanitation, food safety and operating efficiency in the dairy plants and sensitize dairy personnel to product quality accept as per international standards. Moreover, if India wants to prepare itself to assess the global markets, needs possible strategies for takeoff. The second subtopic is dairy marketing strategies in the context of globalization should be as the first strategy is focused approach. While the product portfolio has been growing, Indian dairy industry should plan for reach out the newer markets, but the strategy here is more product specific. The second strategy is wider spread. However, as far as other dairy products are concerned, Indian dairy industry should plan to expand across the board. The third strategy is focus on nutritional value. Use scientific based guides and studies such as this to convince consumers to consume your dairy product. Associate your product with the study itself. Next is challenges and issues in dairy marketing in global context. Global marketing refers to the marketing activities that direct the flow of goods and services to the customer or user is more than one nation. Globalization is no longer as abstraction, but a stark reality that virtually all firms, large and small, faces. Firms that want to survive in the 21st century must confront this all-encompassing force that pervades every aspect of business. In a wide range of industries, from automobiles to food and clothing, firms face the pressure of global competition at home as well as in international market. Choosing not to participate in global market is no longer an option. All firms and industries, regardless of their size, have to craft strategies in the broader context of world market to anticipate, respond and adapt to the changing configuration of these markets. Firms initially entering international markets will be more concerned with learning about international markets, selecting an appropriate arena to compete and determining how to leverage core competences to international markets. Once in international markets, firms have to build their position in these markets, establish a strong local presence by developing new products and adapting to local tastes and preferences. As the firm expands internationally, it will need to move away from country-centered strategies and improve integration and coordination across national markets, leveraging these competences and skills to develop a leadership position. The fourth aspect is productivity growth in Indian agriculture. The Indian agricultural sector has been undergoing economic reform since the early 1990s in the move to liberalize the economy to benefit from globalization. India is one of the largest agricultural based economies, remained closed until the early 1990s. By 1991, there was growing awareness that the inward-looking import substitutions and overvalued exchange rate policy, coupled with various domestic policies pursued during the past 4 decades, limited entrepreneurial decision making in many areas and resulting in a high cost domestic industrial structure that was out of line with the world prices. Hence, the new economic policy of 1991 stressed both the external sector reform in the exchange rate trade and foreign investment policies and international reform in areas such as industrial policy, price and distribution controls and fiscal restructuring in the financial and public sectors. In addition, India's membership and commitment to World Trade Organization, it is also called WTO. In 1995, it was a clear sign of India's intention to take advantage of globalization and face the challenges of accelerating its economic growth. In the last 5 decades, the government objective in agriculture policy and the instruments used to realize the objectives have changed from time to time, depending on both internal and external factors. Agricultural policies at the spectral level can be further divided into supply side and demand side policies. Macro level policies include policies to strengthen agricultural and non-agricultural sector linkages and industrial policies that affect input supplies to agriculture and the supply of agricultural materials. Globalization in the context of agriculture can be best discussed in the context of 3 components are improvement of productive efficiency by ensuring the convergence of potential and realized output, increase in agricultural exports and value added activities using agriculture produce, and finally improved access to domestic and international markets that are either tightly regulated or are overly protected. These components are linked in various ways. For example, productive efficiency would enhance value added activities in agriculture through agro-processing and exports of agriculture and agro-based products. These activities in turn would increase income and employment in the industrial processing sector. Thus, globalizing agriculture has the potential to transform subsistence agriculture to commercialized agriculture and to improve the living conditions of the rural community. Next is challenges of globalization. It is important to realize that globalization poses many challenges to a developing country like India, which had relied on the state direct and regulated policy regime for more than 4 decades. In moving to a more open market based economy, there are many transitional problems that the country has to manage. The government must play a proactive role in facilitating the globalization process so that the opportunity sets for the economic agents are widened and the adverse effect of globalization are minimized. The Indian government must also prepare the necessary information base and develop its capacity to articulate India's concern and policy trade-off in the international forums for multilateral trade and environmental negotiations. The last aspect is globalization and Northeast India. The Northeast India comprises of 8 states of highly undulated hilly terrain covering 2,63,179 square kilometer, which is about 8% of the total geographical area of the country. The region is the home of extraordinarily diverse mosaic of ethnic groups having distinctive social, cultural and economic identity more akin to their South Asia neighbors than mainland India. The total population of the region is about 3.8% of the country's total population, of which Assam contributes 68% of the total population. Assam recorded the highest density of population with 340 per square kilometer, which is also higher than the national average of 313 per square kilometer, followed by Tripura which 305 per square kilometer. Otherwise, the region is sparsely populated with an overall density of population of 149 per square kilometer. The region is richly endowed with the biodiversity, hydropotential, minerals like oil and natural gas, coal, limestone, etc. and forest wealth. Over 10% of forest products requirement in the country are met from this region only. The region has a very high potential to generate hydropower, that is about 80% of the total hydropower potential in the country. Arunachal Pradesh alone is expected to generate 30% of the total available in the country. With varied geoclimatic conditions, the region is ideally suited for horticulture, floriculture and other plantation crops. A variety of fruits like pineapples, banana, orange, etc. grow abundantly in the region. The region is famous for most number of orchid varieties in the country. Tea is a major plantation crop grown in the region and is the largest producer in the country, contributing over 95% of the total production. The region is also richly endowed with varieties of medicinal plants having high value in the international market. But due to the lack of proper infrastructure, transport and communication system and geopolitical conditions of the region, these resources largely remain untapped. The economy of the region primarily depends on agriculture sector, contributing over 40% of the income and employ about 70% of the total working population. Although National Strategic Development Plan share of agriculture sector has declined to about 30%. The number of population dependent upon this sector continued to remain high even in the post-globalization period. The industrial sector in the region continued to be in pathetic condition. Industrially, the region is one of the most backward regions in India. Only Assam and to some extent Meghalaya have moved ahead of the rest of the states in terms of industrial development, whose industrialization centered on tea, oil and timber. An examination on the overall annual compound growth rate of National Strategic Development Plan in the region revealed that there is a slight improvement in post-globalization period, though varies from state to state. The region has more issues to be addressed and challenges to face than any other parts of the country, of which the three most important areas which require immediate attention are insurgency, infrastructure and governance. Lastly, I conclude about this topic by saying globalization is expected to be a process through which an increasingly free flow of ideas, people, goods, services and capital would lead to the integration of economies and societies. It is characterized by an accelerated flow of trade, capital and information as well as mobility of individuals across geographical borders. It reflects comprehensive level of interaction than that has occurred in the past, suggesting something behind the word international.